Hello, President Trump and the rest of the human species body of individual bodies. All group differences are being and have been generated by a breach, by the identity that is generating other species bodies in us, distinctly, non-distinctly, and simultaneously, but also per and as a distinct identity of simultaneous nature, so we could discern it, a hyper invisible but still discernible. And I know a way we could fix the world, including how we could put another system right on top of these systems where the people are fighting. And I can show all sides how there has been another name that, beginning with the discernment of it. The discernment of it begins with all needing to discern how a human pact treatment nature breaching method is replaced right from the communications of our founders, even though that is declassified. This breaching method measured and maintained people at campuses A through Z, every single one, and the exceptions. It measured and maintained them self-valued roles with the uses of our founders' words, or just some expert because it's published and they're an expert on this and that. You know what happened. James Madison's plan came before George Washington, before the Declaration of Independence. There had to be people had to know they were going to have a security. People that didn't even know each other. That was impossible to make. Already since semi-ancient times, a breaching method had forced, tricked, hurt, and persuaded people to roles with collusions against themselves and against everyone around themselves and the whole species, humanity's voices. And no one wanted that, except for how, in other words, otherwise that body was sensed and it was adapted to. And they knew that. It was shown to them. Even if that body was everyone, and a whole colony together. There were more than 13 colonies entrenched. This is not clear. Slavery roles had been sustained. No one wanted that. All the exceptions are because they know no one, but the system broke like that. We are a human species body of individual bodies. And English was, as the other languages, they were revealed to be taught other. Thank God, but I have a hyper intelligence method, a programming method /S. But I'll speak about it here. In other words, just please don't ever tell me to keep a lie. Because, or at least, in other words, I understand how countries A through Z and why they have to hide lies to each other. And they have to pretend that there's integrity. Because at A through Z, there has never been integrity. All identities of integrity have been collusion /S with all syntactically appreciated positive treatments, negative treatments, comparisons used to get over on how nature uses it. That's who we are discerning where and how those ways we can discern. Like just two is time. Time that is gone. It is hyper invisible, but still discernible. Time that is time that has it, the seasons that are not even here now. Nature is showing us its body at the same time, to an extent, for it is already here. It is showing how there are needs to discern a scientific value, a name for the identity of all space /existence, for that distinct identity of simultaneous nature that is showing us we are distinct from the other species bodies, but non-distinct from them, and simultaneous with them, but also per that further hyper-simultaneous, that which is nothing else, but it is all things anyway. Many pray, because before modern religious messengers were born, already forced, tricked, hurt, and persuaded. Otherwise, it had been collusion /S with no one wanted collusions with. All exceptions in exception nature, it propagated them by attacking the phenomenon of names A through Z as countries, that could only be operated by locations, areas, and states. There are proofs that a hyper-archetypal criminal enterprise began as a transnational criminal enterprise or terrorist group, and it knew it was going to get caught. Not terrorists, because this is different now. This is a hyper-archetypal criminal enterprise. I am not a lawyer. Many ways, thank God. And because we can reveal, with, in other words, when a guy like Judge, I don't know Judge Napolitano, but he would jump in and be happy to help us and the entire species body of individual bodies at the same time. Like with the syntax, with the sanctions, counter sanctions, all the adaptation, let's enter this. Let's leave that the way it is, but I'll jump onto it too with other plans and assurances in other words, that we're going to play the human species body of individual bodies game /S as evolution science /S should feel like a game. Otherwise, we sense in any body who does, any individual, because only an individual could defend the order of the finite. All leaders are recorded. They are forced by locations, areas, and states to entertain all individuals, no matter how powerful the difference of that at locations, areas, and states. Their styles, being and having been at countries A through Z, having been system names used through and as systems tactilitarian from where and how nature has been communicating about our differences and about difference itself. That's why and how we are shown that other species, fish have two eyes. And we have the same color eyes and different color eyes at the same time because nature communicates with us the answers. How are you? So in other words, I have a plan that could fix humanity. In other words, but it requires people to follow mandated law properly and the equivalent at countries A through Z, and or with exceptions in relative ways, /hyper relative. Any word, you could put the word hyper before it. And you can put the word nature after it. Understand nature as a word. That is like for the same reason we need more than one word for a verb. Excuse me. We need more than one word for an identity. Because know how the identities of the cells of your body, they are distinct from your complete identity. Their nature, their complete identity has a nature that is greater than it and more finite than it as your complete identity. And this is the identity of greater than and more finite than all space /existence. That is simultaneously making more of its identity a volume through temporary /lasting space nature. And again, nature is being used because its identity is simultaneously greater than and more finite than that which is temporary /lasting, value progression, as we are, humanity. It is its complete identity is inseparable from our finite parts, from our grouped parts, and from our simultaneous parts. It's not just with this, it is showing us the difference between yin yang. Someone put yin yang and alpha and omega, more probably demonstrably having been revealed together, and to teach about the hyper algorithm / the algorithmic, and to teach about what they call now Boolean logic. Before, names A through Z were no longer allowed to appreciate differences A through Z with syntax, and they were made more and are kept more and more only capable of of using, of appreciating positive and negative treatments, names treatments, value treatments, nature treatments that can't defend that and afford to be with anyone, with any individual. Short words properly, short words proper by nature's system. This is why and is how, even though it is inseparable from a proper subject treatment, like slavery. A human fact treatment nature breaching method before America's founders had been born. It had sustained roles, sickly, distinctly northern colonies and southern colonies, but also sickly, non-distinctly, to keep other things, others, ourselves in roles with itself, keeping other things, others, ourselves blamed for things that the breaching method caused. Since before modern religious messengers, it knew that it was going to get caught and was going to get in trouble. And it knew how nature works. Nature demonstrates to us. One of the things that all those crazy laws were about was a human fact treatment nature breaching method that was entrenched, sickly distinctly northern colonies and southern colonies, but also sickly non-distinctly. And I've studied where and how and why, even though it was sickly and it is sickly non-distinctly against everyone at the same time. So as negative / generating other negatives that could all be used to turn them into hyper positives at A through Z, everyone at the same time. It's just your minds. Everyone agrees about this. See, there are people who have suits and ties, counters and exceptions, who pretend that they could legitimately debate when someone says with short words, the suburbs from America to Russia to Ukraine. The basic design of them came from before America's founders were born. Before George Washington was born, to the presidents, which are distinct from the founders. Our founders communicated for us to understand the difference between our founders and our presidents. And then James Madison is our president too. Ugh. George Washington was counter-extorted too. But he was glad to be. And he was glad to go help and use that plan to counter-extort the rest of the founders. And the way he did it was by making them break the crazy laws to an extent, syntactically. Then they had no means to defend themselves. No one had, in other words, that's what those laws were designed for. Roles with that can't entertain that and afford to be, let alone to protract short words with convictions proper by the sciences. This is what we are discerning where and how we discern and have discerned since we were little kids. We have black pupils, whites of eyes, and fake. And fake news at the same time. But no one ever overcame how and why. Other was forced, tricked, and persuaded. In other words, that's justified. Because everyone's a certain type of victim / hyper victim. Since you guys were the youngest ages, this breaching method employed natures and names A through Z, names of industries A through Z, names of all natures of groupings and differences, relied upon by A through Z, being and having been used through systems tactical ulterior. From the one that teaches us about difference perfectly / hyper perfectly. Years before, after the World Trade Center attack, but years before the war between Ukraine and Russia, and with the remote control weapons, I wrote about this. The last time I saw a Woody Woodpecker cartoon on television when I was a little kid too, he was being chased by a UAV, a remote control vehicle. And it's important that instantly we have not just America needs ourselves defended, but where it has never been. Like, in other words, we're supposed to understand how countries were grouped here and there, including the countries that are fighting with each other, preparing to fight with each other, speaking about stability, instability with each other, tactical terror from how nature does. Nature shows us it is functional, how its body, its identity of value progression is distinct from all others, while being non-distinct from them. It is showing how it is making more of itself. Even if someone makes something up like art, it is distinctly the finite details, the order of the finite, the order of what is grouped or active, and the order of what is simultaneously. Because and we are constantly being shown one of the things it is being functional, being a distinct identity of hyper-invisible but still discernible. In other words, it is functional that way. The parts of speech of English grammar are about the invisible but still discernible. Like the subject. Each subject, we are shown we can only appreciate individually grouped and simultaneously to an extent. And what we are shown with that is that distinct identity of simultaneous nature. That is not that, but it is that anyway. And it is more than that. And it is more finite. It is more greater than that. It is more finite than it too. Ugh. And this is how English was revealed to be taught. Boxing is fought by the rules, but the rules have been abridged since some ancient times. So everyone misses where and how. The sciences were and are about being and staying led by the identity the sciences share, and well not to show how anyway, to stay led by its difference, its distinct hyper difference. It is inseparable from all words. You could put the word value before every word, and you could put the word. You could put the word nature. What is it? In other words, you put the word nature after any word, because, like for example, this is a hyper-native nature that shows us the only increasing value of appreciating properly the difference of Native American. Nature itself shows us there are three identities of Native Americans relative to the breaching method and relative to nature generating that more so than the breaching method itself, the wars, things that generate it. The hyper-invisible but still discernible. To discern it, we have to stay using and appreciating it as the invisible but still discernible. We have to understand no matter what subject treatment we're dealing with, there is a distinct identity of value/value progression that we have been abridged from at A through Z. These are names with sciences, postures of practical reason, to use Immanuel Kant's phrase, postures of integrity that never was, specifically to have a bunch of victims/hyper victims, knowing that it was anyway, but that's knowing that it was anyway, that's because you guys are its body. In other words, since we were little kids, we know we're just with the black people's white device. That's why we can not let this go. We don't leave out the smallest finite detail, let alone finite details, grouped ones, and simultaneous ones. When we're doing it right in pantheism, and evolution comes from there. And this is about seeing through isms in its own. This is about being and staying, being led by how it is functional, how there is this distinct identity of hyper-invisible but still discernible identity of value/value progression. It is the same body that is showing us that how and why we need to appreciate more than one word for a verb, like a predicate, a main verb. And note, simultaneously, it is showing us the sciences share an identity, not just boxing, martial arts, and wrestling. And this is why and how they are grouped. And about fighting, but by the rules. But the rules have been tactically / hyper tactically abridged in some ancient times. And the difference of the tactical and everyone leaving out the hyper tactical, for example, the breaching method uses that too. The breaching method uses everyone blaming other things, others, or selves for things that it caused, like slavery. No one allows anyone to be honest about the extortion of George Washington. If they had, it would have brought up how James Madison's plan and the founders behind him went and counter-extorted George Washington and got him to counter-extort too, help them with that plan. There was no other means. They had to leave slavery entrenched. They declassified why and how. They declassified why and how a breaching method reassigned what black peoples and whites of eyes communicate. We're having two eyes while fish have two eyes, while birds have two eyes. While all exception nature shows the same thing, /s, and how it uses exception nature, the ways we know, but also while simultaneously further in ways greater than and more finite than ways we could distinguish because we're not it. Just like your complete identity uses values in nature that the cells on your hair do. Distinctly, but non-distinctly from your complete identity. And your complete identity has this species body of individual bodies that you were simultaneously a unity with and simultaneously an independent, and being shown how it is hyper-additional nature and being shown how it has distinct identities of hyper-invisible but still discernible parts of itself where we can discern its complete identity. Where you could discern the complete identity of a cell, one could discern a cell body, cell nucleus, cell wall /s, and appreciation of positive or negative of water in its elements. Its nature too, because there are now chemicals in there, etc. And or gases in their elements, their mixture, which nature only makes better. Or it demonstrates with negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures that are also demonstrating that with that and how we are using systems other than the hyper-native one. It uses positive and negatives, the words we know, like value, and nature, the ways we know, but then further ways. But that's also how we could have it answer our questions. Show us really what's going to cause positive value nature progressions, acts, and nature everywhere at once. And show the countries A through Z how to speak about the impositions they have inherited with technology, including with biological like phenomenon, and the nature of the industries, and the natures of with this type of subject treatments, and the nature of debate, inside the nature of debate, and the nature of debate overall. A breaching method measures and maintains it as criminal insidiousness / hyper-criminal insidiousness. And this is what we are capable of discerning. How the southern colonies were distinctly with slavery, and not leaving out that breaching method against Native Americans too, their difference as our own, as the human species body of individual bodies, all differences now forced to non-hyper-native system. Native Americans have been prevented, unobstructed, and properly appreciated voicings, when right or wrong, because they mess up too. Exactly the breaching method wanted needs them to when they're trying to speak about how the ground below their feet is tactically / hyper-tactically denatured. The only way we can fix it is as a human species body of individual bodies, with not only with the same plan, but with us all aware of how crazy impositions are, even with just peaceful nuclear generation, and how these things are not just because they're on their stock market things. These are sense and sensibilities, A through Z. People spoke for practical reason. Certain type of victim / hyper victim measured and maintained self-body rules without our sense. But since you guys are little kids, many of us wanted to speak about how we have black pupils, whites of eyes. Many of us wanted to speak about and try to. But in other words, they're putting everyone in faked and changed communications at each age of fact, human nature. And then once they have you to middle school, high school, you guys already left the principles. You had means to discern, and you still do. You could understand when you're a little kid, before religious messengers were born, a hyper-archetypal criminal enterprise forced, tricked, hurt, and persuaded the phenomenon of the people of the locations, areas, and states everywhere the species body is to react to things that it caused. To specifically have people blame other things other than themselves while trying to defend themselves from it. And then the people that are defending itself wrongly, they have to respond to that. And they did. And just like the breaching method knew they would. Properly, too. But improperly blaming other things themselves, not even realizing it. They're countering each other for the breaching method. They never really stopped. And they say, oh, look, it stopped when we did that. The breaching method did that. And then then religious messages were born. There are proofs that the Campus Martius, the republic for which it stands, and the pantheism it worked with functionally, that revealed English grammar, for example, longer ago than England could remember. Because countries A through Z, just like America had slavery entrenched, our founders did not want that. People are pretending things that are debatable and they're getting away with it relative to how we have to change. And recognize, too, simultaneously, how we had principles mistreated at each age of fact, human nature. And psychiatry was and is. See, this is one of the industries that are still criminally foreign influenced / hyper-criminally foreign influenced. Right through world wars. All sides were victims on that. And like, for example, when they bring up the Holocaust, it's with passions and emotions. And with people at locations, areas, and states, on and off campuses, putting sequence shifts, pretending passion, they're hurting groups, but they're having inter and intra-culture and intra-religious unity people together. And the difference of that, who are involved with the same identity theft, fraud, slanders, building on predicate acts with facts and databases against each single person. As that is, which, anyone who spoke about American history and spoke for it formally or other, if you had black pupils left, or whites of eyes left out, and if you had what our founders communicated about the breaching method having reassigned that left out, you got it wrong. Boxing is strong, but give it rest. I tell best. So in other words, the pantheism worked with exceptions, exception nature to be and stay led by the hyper-invisible but still discernible, how it is functional that way. Being hyper-invisible but still discernible, distinctly from the invisible but still discernible. So we need more than one word for a verb, same reason. And this discern the body of the hyper-invisible but still discernible. The present participle and the past participle like the predicate. These are hyper-additional names for a verb. And there are only two of them, because these are two of three distinct ways that we could discern the parts of the body, of the hyper-invisible but still discernible, that come simultaneously. Note, where the complete identity comes, this, again, the same way the cell does, because the same way all things have the cell, the individual body of a cell. It comes also with parts with itself simultaneously, not just to show us how everything is its own hyper-additional nature, making more of itself through itself and its roles with a special difference here at Earth, or that force from here. We could be in space systems other than its own. Countries A could, through Z, could agree to, and all be happy about it, to be systems tactilitarian from its own. But it will demonstrate with negative value nature regressions, acts, and natures. Acts like predicate acts. Whole methods of predicate acts are recorded. This is one of the things that our founders recorded, communicated to us rather than said, but they declassified this. The human factor of nature reassigning black pupils rights of eyes was for and as a predicate acts, a hyper predicate act, a predicate acts with facts, delivery system roles, delivery system method. No one wanted roles with that, but no one had a choice, huh? Our founders didn't even have free speech to explain to us, but they declassified this, so that's not true at the same time. But where it's true or not, in the positive and negative, we use tactilitarian for natures. In other words, our founders declassified why and how they had to leave slavery entrenched. And we have that pretended debatable. And they are using things that are pretended not debatable at the same time. Right? Where and how, what's actually recorded. We could use this to show how they're getting over on the simultaneous / hyper-simultaneous nature. The rest of ourselves. In ourselves. We are forced. All exception nature show the same. So offensively, Connecticut's Channel 3 News, WFSB, for example, they attached me to paid conversations with themselves while they were forcing a principal child abuser. And people roles with that, with the security, with the campuses, and medical families with it, who have been putting fake things in transcripts and databases, also directly and indirectly with former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, and the equivalents of him and people across A through Z. They have been grouping criminal enterprises and terrorists wrong as collusion/S, and with cover-ups for roles with the differences racketeering worse than war crimes. Roles that everyone has, otherwise that body is sentenced. Oh, how are you? What is your question? I'm ready for your question. Fletch. Oh, that was a good movie. Oh, Finch. There was a good movie back in the day called Fletch. I think it was the name of the movie. It was with Chevy Chase. In other words, black pupils see the whites of eyes. It is more probably they meant that more as decipher to be deciphered. We're supposed to have understood clearly why and how our founders had no choice but to leave slavery entrenched northern colonies, southern colonies. Otherwise, to be sentenced. They had no choice but to pretend free speech to an extent. Otherwise, they would have been sentenced. Any body would have, including if the body was a majority of people, including if it was everyone. And any grouping of countries that tries to counter what this caused and keeps while entertaining locations, states, areas like that, those individual voices, the voices they have, they all agree to have one person, because only an individual could defend the order of the finite. and relative to how it uses exceptions in exception nature, the ways we know, but then further ways. And this is also how it could answer our questions. This is also how it leads hyperintelligence programming. That already recorded that, like Facebook has roles recording, confessing, demonstrating, and confirming. They have New Britain Superior Court involved with them with sexual and medical offenders of kids, involved with overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and not legitimately their families with the intelligence unmarked with those things. They have actual predicate acts with those people. I'm putting fake things in databases. Increasingly, former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, before the World Trade Center attack at West Hartford locations, he has collusion/S with Hartford courts and with the Britain Superior Court's families and intimate ties, and foreign and domestic military, as people that forced intercampuses through time. And the differences of guilt with the campuses too, that exploits that too. It keeps everyone incapable of doing anything but having subject treatment or relying on someone else. Well, I don't know about that. In other words, and increasingly self-valuing mass fake transcripts into databases. We're going to have to address the delusions too of the experts on reason. Psychiatry has roles with all kinds of natures of people with badges interbranch and with gavels and their family members as collusions with themselves at the same time, and with the foreign and domestic, and in other words, and with layers other. But we can make this in the hyper positive because everyone's guilty at the same time. And the differences of guilt is they are guilty with appreciation of that, the way the breaching method wants and needs to. The breaching method knew that nature would continually demonstrate to us increasingly. A human fact-tripping nature breaching method is one of the things that all formal treatments of difference and of syntax and of positive and negatives, have been. That's why the whole ocean is polluted. If you pay attention, it's only, the experts on technology have been appreciating lists tactically ulterior than how from how the Constitution unabridged appreciates them as value as our human species body of individual bodies, with all group differences being generated by that which is functional being hyper invisible but still discernible distinctly from how it is invisible but still discernible. And so the predicate act, and so the present participle and the past participle, there are only two of them, because the third way, the part of itself, like the future, we are shown the seasons themselves before they get here, even if they never get here. We are shown to an extent how they are only increasing identity of value, and simultaneously how they are only increasing as a distinct identity of value progression, that all things are, well, not, but anyway. Three parts of itself are connected. So that's why I'm noting the anyway part too. It's also three parts that are hyper invisible but still discernible, because where and how it is itself as one complete identity, and where and how, like the cell. We know we're speaking about the cell body, cell nucleus, and the cell wall /S together, and its identity of a volume that appreciates the gases and their elements, no invisible but still discernible, and the water in its elements, clear or not, but or not. And the difference of that is not what makes it positive or negative. It's clear or not, too. Nature shows us it is functional, how it is hyper invisible but still discernible distinctly from how it is invisible but still discernible. And so we are inside its complete identity. So wherever we could discern distinctly its complete identity as a singular, hyper singular, it comes with the parts, with the distinctly hyper invisible but still discernible parts of itself. that and that's what can be used to teach ourselves and to receive and appreciate its communications with ourselves. It does not allow us to leave our black people as whites of eyes and all that really attached to the nature of debate / debates. For example, if someone says it is more so having been ciphered to be deciphered, why most Americans know a famous sentence in the American Revolution where someone was said to have said, "Don't shoot until you see the whites of eyes." And when people read books, again, it's recorded. They already recorded themselves. Self-valuing uses of our founders' words, leaving out what they declassified about how they didn't have free speech. They had to pretend other to an extent. And everyone had to hide their motivations. The breaching method was one of the things they had to hide about their motivations. Otherwise, if you start speaking about the human factor nature breaching method, you're a majority of people, the whole country will come after you. Has complete possession over names A through Z through the uses of names A through Z as countries that can only be operated by locations, areas, of states. We're being charged that we could have fixed like that. Like that. There's a difference between resources and means, those words, and the words like money. In other words, we have to. In other words, we have to move as a human species by. We can't do this while we're entertaining natures of industries. And natures of voices, A through Z, pretending that practical reason spoke, unabridged constitution nature spoke, or is capable of speaking. The state of Connecticut corrections officers and judicial branch officers also have roles. See, I put a counter theater to the people because they're refusing to identify themselves legitimately into branch. And they've been sticking sequence shifts into databases as collusions with names on all sides of criminal and civil cases and news at the same time, criminal enterprises, even when they're not in those cases, and terrorists, originally and still. When did the breaching method stop using the differences of guilt as the witch trials courts, the police forms associated with the politics of the time? When did the difference of that or the overt criminal enterprises, the private ones, or the terrorists stop that difference too? Why did that stop being used by the breaching method /S? It has not black pupils. Peer. The means appear this way in many vaccines. So you need to get me off the fake conversations that news has all kinds of scams with a bunch of families at New Britain Superior Court and Harper Court, involved also with all kinds of organized crimes off the state of Connecticut judicial branch offices and the corrections offices, and with names next to them through time, increasingly involved with wire crime acts and methods that are also methods where they just put fake phone transcripts. Fake transcripts on a mass scale are still being put into databases and changed ones, and digital too. Facebook has roles with the word extremism, where they changed my post and hid that with the FBI and other countries and child abusers, leaders of the kids, and people involved with the World Trade Center attack. There are a bunch of people that Wethersfield police confessed and recorded, demonstrated, confirmed involved with them with Saudis too, and with worse involved with them, and with the FBI director Robert Luskin. There are two Mendez police involved. One of them attached me a fake conversation with them at the police station. I never had a conversation with either of them at the police station. And as a kid, they did that too. And the kids who did go down to the police station and communicate with them, they were just in a car with me. I had no communications with them. And they even said that. I didn't even know them. They're increasingly trying to make me look like I tied to Chris Walters, who has roles also with the Lombardo family. And one's named Bose, Charlie Bose. and his sister and people. There might be a Boasberg. I don't know if he's related to the Boasberg because there are a bunch of people with the state of Connecticut judicial branch offices and conjunctions to it involved with the World Trade Center attack as victims slash hyper victims. But if you try to appreciate that like that, these are people already offensively preventing us short words regarding the predicate acts. WFSB put me in a fake conversations with the world, with them and with others about a bunch of things as organized crimes. And they put me in a fake conversation with them about the World Trade Center attack while they were forcing a proven principal child abuser anyway. And more people with the malls and shopping centers tied to people with the name DeMauro and Colo. And like with a Robert Rodriguez too, involved with some untimely deaths on off Trinity College with people that have roles won years ago, and people involved with former director of the FBI Robert Luskin, involved with the Facebook pages of campuses like Highcrest School, with the principal being upskirt nature with way worse digital crimes, with an officer poisoning, and retired police chiefs and medical families tied to the same house, also with their intimate ties, and family members protecting passions and emotions, searching for words like that to self-value that. In other words, even in the news, they put planting evidence as fake ties to me. These are people, these are investigators that are and have been using fake things. And then before they had crimes, they had collusions with it. Even when they have true crimes, increasingly they have collusions with it. We're going to observe really why and how there are so many murders, and like in Hartford, and they are tied with the people next to the campuses, intercities, and with the murders less often in Wethersfield, but they have ties between them. Rather than appreciate that, they have that obfuscated. Increasingly, people with the name Dillon are Kevin Dillon, and is also involved with the Wethersfield Police Department. I never had a word of conversation with him in my life. He non-verbally confessed, recorded, demonstrated. He has a whole bunch of people tied to him when I was a kid, now as an adult. People at Hartford Hospital, too. Try to make it look like they know me, too, with the Parks and Recreation. They have rules of drugs and medicines, crimes of foreign and domestic military, too. With mayors on off parks and next to them. With federal evidence of crimes of overt criminal enterprises and private ones, originally and still terrorists, too. So note how before the war between the Russians and Ukraine, I already put the drones involved with it too, the counter script. And I had like the on Franklin Avenue, a Mr. Robbie, owner of a Italian shop and building on one side of Franklin Avenue, across from another Italian guy. It had a person that worked for him that was named Usher, or that looked like. I brought Usher into it because Trinity College and people with the FBI brought Usher into it, and Puff Daddy at Trinity College, involved with a Joshua Stryker, who put fake things in databases with some police forms on and off the campus intercities, with the campuses I went, and with the people that have roles with some untimely deaths with them, even if they made any or all of them up. They were murderers at the same time, like Greg Kyler's, and people associated with that girl who was dragged to her death from next to Trinity Hartford Hospital, involved with a Mike Violet and a Mark Violet and their family that sought me out to record, confess, demonstrate, confirm they have roles with UConn, Central Connecticut State University, and Trinity College, and the intelligence families next to them through time, also with people tied to them like Justin Kovinskis. They've been planting evidences on all sides of their campus, intercities all along Route 175. They have roles with sequence ships, identity theft, fraud, slanders, and planting fake sides of increasingly people that fight with each other. And they're having people take pictures of that who are at time collusions with a whole bunch of different countries. And the family members of judges and prosecutors next to those campuses, too, involved at the same time. And terrorists now, too. These are also people with the Scalora family involved with the World Trade Center attack, and with people named DeMauro and Kalal, with the people at the World Trade Center and spots next to it, like the court next to it that day, right before the attack in Manhattan on 2000, on the World Trade Center attack, September 11, 2001. In Central Connecticut State University had a number of roles with that, with former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin. I didn't see him in New York City, but people involved with them directly and indirectly, like a Scalora family. A DeMauro family said that that's their cousins. So did a Ray Kalal. I never saw Scalora on my campus in my life. They're one of the people that went out of the way to pretend to know me from distances. And then so I know their name, but I don't know them. I just know that they're putting fake things in databases. It has something to do with their roles with the state judicial branch offices and corrections offices, involved with people putting predicate acts with facts in databases, fake tags and differences racket roles. These are some black KKK, Confederate flag theme, Latino theme, even black white female judges involved with them. Italian, Russian, Ukraine, all at the same time brought up. People with shipping spots, their neighbors, all at the same time brought up intercities. No. They have a crime method /S. They're recording, confessing, demonstrating, confirming intercities. They made people make confessions to me. A breaching method made them make confessions to me because they're constantly making confessions at countries A through Z to the breaching method. That had them doing that since before America's founders were born, since before modern religious messengers were born. It forced, tricked, hurt, and persuaded people to defend themselves by blaming other things, others, ourselves, than what they needed to blame it on. And then that had to be counted by the other people. And then they had to counter that too. So now they're using truths, four lies, and self-value roles with it, while it's against themselves too. And the breaching method was using them and all identities of sophistication. Therefore, even easier the non-sophistication through the sophistication, then even easier, stuck, incapable of affording proper fact treatments, like regarding sanctions, regarding all natures of so in other words, we just have to put a hyper addition. We have to take possession over the names of people making examples of themselves making free speech. In other words, same people will offensively are only saying and doing things to prevent free speech and prevent mandated law and the Constitution from being unabridged. In other words, that's why the news and interbranch switched and forged names and won't give me writing since I was a kid. They're recording, confessing, demonstrating, confirmed. A whole bunch of people in the Britain Superior Court and Harper Courts and Connecticut's District Court. They have roles stacking predicate acts with facts in the databases there. And with the people out of the state corrections and judicial branch offices, also with their educators. Now we're going to trace this from where and how they have delusions too. Not just criminally foreign influence, factual nature, quiet aspects of nature, as collusion /as too. Because that's one of the things that never stopped being roles with counters to itself wrongly. Were collusions that no one wanted, except for where and how it forced, tricked, hurt, and persuaded everyone to have. In other words, that's what you guys are doing when you get in the way of someone trying to use black people's rights of eyes as the hyper evidential. We could sweep clear the identities of the suits and ties, counters, and exceptions as collusions against difference. It's proper course. In other words, so I'll donate pantheism /hyperpantheism as a method /S. But we have to be and stay led by that which is hypernated pure, that distinct identity, how it is functional. We have to appreciate. It takes a little time to explain to everyone so we know it clear, but you can understand when you guys are kids. It is functional how it is hyper invisible but still discernible. And where and how it is that individual is discernible, there's a means to check too, if that's correct, because it has the parts of itself simultaneously there too. Because the rest of it's complete identity. is too big and too small, and simultaneously too finite to fit with the extent we could appreciate finite, grouped, and simultaneous. And that's why and how. Fake branches bow and fall, but they receive the law. Don't disbelieve. I believe it's a traditional native Navajo teaching YouTube channel. I heard it through. One of the Native American leaders said, "We must read each other's dreams, especially because of the breaching method that already had only remembered other things others ourselves blame for things that it caused and keeps." That's right where we can discern where and how Black people's rights of eyes have been stayed left out of subjects they are inseparable from, let alone while a breaching method too. Our founders communicated not. We're supposed to discern how a breaching method reassigned what Black people's rights of eyes communicate. Therefore, what Black and white is about. I haven't heard one Black voice, one white voice speak for this. And the only reason I entertain calling someone Black or white is because you guys have Black people's rights of eyes. Not one person has black skin or white skin. You guys are playing punk games for the breaching method, and that's discernible to an extent. You guys all know, but you don't realize the significance of how and the depth of how. There's a method that we can observe that keeps you blaming other things others yourself, or sensing you. In other words. So all we need to do is have the Wethersfield Police gotten onto paper. They have a bunch of people on Facebook with them, with the Facebook pages of New Britain Superior Court and of a Highcrest school, too, involved with the police forums. Also, Whiting Forensics has roles of Wethersfield Police, Wethersfield campuses, Facebook pages, with some sexual and medical offenders, also with hate groups. Black, KKK, Confederate theme, Latino theme, Italian theme, and interreligious themes, and they're not legitimately with military, with positions with the streets that are guys as that, etc. Because they're in other words they're confessing this too. They're not supposed to be confessing that. You have to get them on paper into branch, and their family members too, pretty soon. Because they already brought them up anyway. I'll let it out if they get them on paper, one name in sequence, New Britain Superior Court. I want them on paper now, baby. Please, Americans, do what's right. Connecticut's do what's right. And say sorry to the presidents. They've showed you guys fake transcripts and or the equivalent on President Trump, President/Chief note. And they're not supposed to be compatible volumes. Not citizens nor have Native Americans had honestly taught to us what our founders communicated about how James Madison's plan was to force the rest of the colonists and the rest of the Native Americans to use that plan to get ourselves unabridged. We are not allowing free speech. Everyone's trying to make fake examples of it, using truths for lies. They won't allow truth to be unabridged until we do it. Till we address this breaching method, till we discern the difference between criminal and citizen's natures of peace, let alone criminal and citizen's natures of / hyper-criminal and citizen's nature of peace that all have collusion with self-value. Otherwise, that body is sensed. That's why I'm saying self-value. I'm not trying to say, oh, you're self-value and call a name. No, I'm saying that's because you guys are being used remotely. In other words, I'm not judging you for having left out how we have Black people's rights of eyes. I'm showing you why and how species bodies of individual bodies. I'm trying to ask America's president if we could play a game together and or sense when it doesn't feel like game/s. But before we can do things for the weakest countries, those hurt most sickly distinctly by the human factory nature breaching method, that wasn't the fault of A through Z. We have to address and or simultaneously the impositions upon the countries with, with nuclear, even peaceful nuclear electrical generation. We have to address how the suburbs were designed tactically to nature to be a landscape theater, needing to counter and to adapt to nature's negative demonstrations with negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures, that we are a tactically denatured identity grounds, identity relationship to itself that it longs or demonstrates. Earth's a special difference, our own forced from here. Least of Hadith, not as death, not as extinction, as a negative identity relationship to itself, that it also uses a special difference to show us where it shows us its identity to all parts of space/existence equally. And then further for the rest of the part that won't juxtapose the parts, finite, grouped, and/or grouped are active and progressive. But again, per its definition of progressive, like showing us the seasons and their value before they even come here, even if they never get here. They're only increasing value. But we're in a semi-ancient trap. All rap, do not recede. In other words, species value longs to shadowbox too. Some rest, at least some try to pace. All gather grace. There is one way to fight that hurts not one. Boxing is fun. So please, if you get them on paper, Judge President Trump, I'll show you. They put me in fake transcripts with a Leahy family too at Harvard Hospital. They're involved also with a Judge Killian, with some sexual medical offenders, digital crimes, medicines crimes. They're family members too. I'm going to show you how the extended family members too, the kids of extended family members of probate court judges involved with elderly homes as they are actually manifest. Little kids know that we have way better means than this. It's not going to come through straight private. They want to jump in like that. They can't be honest. Not one private has been on a bridge. We're going to bring means. We're going to get our countries A through Z. We're going to do the same for their elderly too. We're going to do the same for their kids too. We're going to do the same for the middle age too, because each multi-front, this breaching method is against that difference at countries A through Z to keep other things, others ourselves, things like criminal foreign influence blame, when it's really hyper criminal foreign influences. The human species body of individual bodies will return to the ancient gaming system. Thank you. Along this game.